I'm just going to stop this because I've got to stop over. I was really interested in the part where you said we should remove socialism entirely. I don't think that's a politically feasible thing to do. I think too many people are too invested in things like the National Health Service that you're never going to get the political capital to make that happen. So is it worth divorcing the concept of social programs from socialism? Because the core premise of socialism is seizing the means of production. The NHS, I mean, I think you'd have to be quite generous to term it a means of production, it's a service. And then I agree with Hayek when in the Road to Serfdom he said, look, there's nothing anti-individualistic about something like a universal healthcare. You know, there's nothing that violates anyone's individual liberties in that regard. In fact, for a lot of people, it's going to help them because they might be down on that. I mean, I personally have relied on it myself. Know, so I'm definitely an individualist, so I can definitely see the appeal and the necessity to have one. And I think that if we can divorce the concepts of socialism and social programs, I don't see a problem with social programs as long as they're not seizing someone's property. Like you say, like the farms in Venezuela is a perfect example.
Sure.
Like these people own those things, the government comes and takes them. That's unacceptable to me because it's not protecting private property rights. But if the government is to set up, say, the NHS, they're not seizing anyone's property, they're not violating anyone's individual rights, and it will be politically expedient for us to say, let's keep and support the NHS and carry on. What do you think?
So let's think about that, right?
Yeah.
They're not seizing anybody's property? So
let's hypothetically suggest they're not.
But that's impossible, right? Because if I'm a doctor, pretty much the only place I can work is for the government. I can set up.
That's not true. We have private practice.
Yeah, but you can't compete with the government. I mean, they're offering a good for free.
So there exists. There are few better quality service.
There are few doctors who are private doctors, and a few can exist. But I didn't go to the best medical school, and I still want to have a private practice, but I'm competing against a product that's being given zero. I would say they've seized my property. They've annulled the value of my education. And indeed, when the NHS was created, they had to seize doctors' practices because it was the only way in which they could create the NHS. Of course, they seized doctors' practices, but more than that, how is it funded? It's funded by seizing people's money, not by people paying insurance, but by seizing people's money, not based on how sick you are, not based on what you'll need in the future. It's not insurance. This is just pure seizure of people's money with the promise of providing you with a service. This is pure socialism. The means of production doesn't just mean manufacturing. It means anything that's a productive activity. Healthcare is a productive activity. And now, the idea that we can never do away with the NHS, that is the idea that I think is dramatically mistaken and has to be challenged. Because if we can't do away with the NHS, from my view, we've lost. Because it means that healthcare will only continue to deteriorate, which it will in the UK. You can tinker with it, you can improve it a little bit, but ultimately, and if the United States adopts, because you guys are free riding off the United States. I mean, nobody tells you this. I tell it to every audience I can. But the whole world is free riding over the fact that we still have some freedom in our healthcare system. So about 48% of American healthcare system is still private, which means 75 to 90% of all medical innovations happen in the United States. It means all experimentation, all the failed stuff that makes possible innovation happens in the United States because we're still free to do it. It means that we're the only country in the world where consumers are actually paying enough for the drugs to make it possible for drug companies to do research and development. When America becomes socialized, I mean, you guys should be the biggest advocates for private healthcare in America, so that you can continue to free ride off of us, because we pay for all the R&D. It's our drug. Why do we have to pay the most in the world for drugs? Because you guys pay cost. Companies make a little bit off of it. So how are they going to pay for R&D? Well, somebody has to pay a lot. We pay a lot because the market.
So I don't.
So my point.
Saying what I'm saying in principle. In principle, if a government were to say, right, okay, here's a new industry, we're going to create it using taxpayer money, and I'm assuming that nobody here is against the idea of paying taxes. I'm
against the idea of coercing people to pay taxes, particularly for something that the marketplace can provide. Right. So we could. I'm willing to concede I'm willing to put for another time.
Yeah.
The argument about whether one should pay taxes or whether one should use codes of taxes for police, military, and judiciary, because I think those have to be provided by the government. I don't think any other entity can provide them. But there is no other human activity. There's no other human activity, primarily, and particularly, I mean, education, healthcare, and all the others, that the private sector cannot and will not provide a much better service. Not even in the same universe as what the government provides. And why? To realize why, one has to understand what the government is. The fundamental nature of government is a gun. What government is force.
It's a monopoly on force.
It's a monopoly of force. There's no place for force in healthcare. So, for example, but that's what the NHS is, right? The NHS basically says, these are the ways in which we treat your disease. These are the approved by the government ways in which we treat your disease. These are the tests we take, and this is how long you have to wait for those tests. And I don't care if you can pay for it or not pay for it. This is what happens.
Yeah.
This is how that's force in healthcare, and it destroys healthcare.
Well, the thing is, you say it's approved by government, but I mean, like, you know, the private health companies are regulated, so they're also approved by government.
Yes.
And under
yes,
force.
they should be regulated.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, like, I always find the argument from, well, this is force. I feel it a bit reductive. It's just like, well, yes, but you know, technically everything a government does is by force, and we agree that a government is a necessary thing. So
I want the government only to do things where force is the only way to do the thing that they're going to do. So policing is force, because what is the I said it during the talk. What makes innovation and progress and success as a human being possible? And that's reason, and thinking, and force negates that. When I tell a doctor these are the 5 things you're allowed to do, he's not going to think about the 6th and 7th and 8th and 9th things, because there's no point in it. Galileo, once he's in house arrest, is not going to publish new books. I mean, he doesn't want to be burnt at the stake. There's no, it suppresses human thought. It suppresses innovation. It suppresses the application of the human mind to the problem at hand. Mm-hmm. So when the government controls education, education becomes standardized and stupid. When the government provides healthcare, it becomes standardized and stupid because it's negating the mind of the doctor, the mind of the educator. It takes away their freedom to think outside of the box and to do what they want, because what is the penalty? Force.
Well, I mean, that seems to be jumping a few steps. I mean, like, nobody's forcing doctors to work anywhere. You know, I mean, they can choose to not be doctors and do something else in their lives. They can choose to open a private practice. These are all things they have the choice of doing.
But you're reversing the freedom, which is my ability to do whatever I want as long as I can find people who will voluntarily deal with me.
Yeah.
Right? And then somebody comes in and puts a gun to the back of my head and says, no, you can't deal with this person, you have to deal with that person. And you're saying, well, I could stop being a doctor if that was the case. But the evil was that somebody pointed a gun at me. Not that I walk away or don't walk away. Why can somebody come and tell me, you can't do this, you have to do that? Why does somebody else have authority over my life? If I want to be a doctor, and if I want to treat people in a certain way, who is the guy? And people are willing to be treated by me. So I'm not forcing them to be treated by me. Why is anybody coming in and telling me, you cannot do that? How is that legitimate?
But doesn't that delegitimize any kind of government regulation?
Yes.
Right,
absolutely.
So, I mean, you don't think there should be any government?
No, I think as long as you are not either posing a risk, a viable risk that can be proved to another human being, or doing something clearly harmful to another human being, you should be left free of all government regulation. Yes, absolutely.
Well, yeah, but there'd be no reason to regulate what you're doing if it's not posing any particular risk. But I mean, you could.
Oh, come on! 99% of regulations have nothing to do with risk.
I'm not like in favour of superfluous regulation, obviously. But it just strikes me that this is I just find it a bit unnuanced, I guess. Like, I don't agree that this is exactly as you're describing it. I guess I'll have to think about it.
Well, it is. I mean, think about a teacher who, in a system, let's say in a system not like the UK where you have relatively quite a few choices, but a system like Sweden where all the schools are run by the government, and you have a teacher in Sweden and you want to start your own school, and you guys have kids who want to come to attend my school, and the state says no. I mean,
Well, no, I disagree with that. I think that.
Yeah, but where's the limit, right? So you know, if you extrapolate from that, right, you'll agree with kind of some of my extreme examples.
Yeah.
But all of the NHS is exactly the same thing. The NHS forces doctors to behave in ways that doctors do not want to do because the government has the ability through force to do that. In a private sector, if they didn't like what the hospital told them to do, they could leave and start their own practice. Here, they can't leave and start their own practice because the government is monopolized. We understand monopoly when it's in the private sector, but here it's a real monopoly, not a private sector monopoly.
It's not actually not, though, is it? And that your contention was that, oh, you're offering the service free. You know, it's going to be a cheaper service.
Sure.
But it's also, like you just said, it's going to be an inferior service. You know, a doctor hosting a private practice, he's going to be more attentive to the individual patients. He's going to be better at his job. It's just like with the education in
It's
Sweden.
a well-known phenomenon in economics that in spite of the fact that what the government provides tends to be of inferior quality,
I agree, yeah.
it drives private capital out. It drives private capital out when it comes to building highways in Latin America, and it drives capital out when it comes to schools, and it drives capital out when it comes to there's no economic and there's no moral legitimacy for the government to be involved in things that it doesn't have to be involved in. I agree with you, you need a government, but you need a government because of the things it has to do. And the only thing it has to do is military and police and judiciary. It doesn't have to do anything else, and therefore it shouldn't do anything else, because by doing it, it violates people's rights, it restricts other people's freedom. Using that gun that it got in order to do policing, it's now using that gun to restrict what I can do. I want to develop a new form of energy that nobody's heard of. What do I need permission from the stupid EPA, from a bunch of bureaucrats at the EPA in order to do it? It's none of their business.
Okay, well, I think...
Maybe